Good morning YouTube, this is the Pond Diver with another real life DIY. Today we're going to be building a really simple deck. Let's build it. So a little background about this deck is that I love to cook outside and I needed a place where I could stage all of my cooking accessories, my grills, sink, things of that nature. So right off the bat, this is the most simple deck you're going to come across on YouTube. And I'm going to put it together as quickly as I can. Everything that I cut, with the exception of 3 boards, were all cut at 90-degree angles, which means you can get away with just a circular saw. You don't have to have a chop saw or go out and buy a big compound miter saw. You could simply do it with a handsaw if you chose. In my case, I happen to have a chop saw on hand. Now, I'm not a deck builder for trade. I simply wanted to build a simple platform, like I said earlier. There are 1,000 different ways to build a deck. Mine is just the simple 90-degree method, and I'm not going to get into what you should and should not do. I'll leave that up for you to make your opinion. What I can tell you, the 2 things you do want to do is you want to make sure that it's okay within your city's covenants or your homeowners association. A few tools that you're going to need right off the bat is a tape measure. You're going to need at least a 4-foot level, and you're going to need a saw, whether it be a hand saw, a circular saw, or chop saw. Now, you'll see in this video that I do use a nail gun. I only do that to put a board in place. That is not how you should attach 2 boards together on a deck. You should use screws, and you should use a minimum length of 2.5 inches, if not 3-inch deck screws. Some terminology I'm going to use throughout this deck build is going to be the ledger. In my case, I have a ledger. A floating deck out in the middle of the yard, you won't necessarily have one. A ledger is just a board that either mounts up to a house. It is, in my case, it's the board that mounts up to my shed. It was my very first board. It was already a level surface to mount to, so we're going to consider it my ledgers. The boards on the outside, those are all called rim joists. The boards that are inside the rim joist are just called joists. And then you will separate the joist by a method called bridging. We're going to cover all this in better detail as we get throughout, but I just want you to be familiar with the terminology. Bridging, joist, rim joist, and ledger. So like I said, I got started with the ledger board first, and then I started working around the rim joist. As I put the rim joist in place, I would shoot a couple of nails to hold it, and then I would walk a few feet down, use my level, and then I would place a post somewhere along the board and just run a temporary screw into the board in order to keep the board level. Now, I did that on all the 3 rim joists that went throughout this square in order to create a square and level surface. Now, those posts that I have are not permanent at this point. Later, I'll come back around, dig a small place out, put a paver in, put the permanent post in, which I screw to the joist. So now that I got my ledger up and my 3 rim joists up, I need to check for square. And the best way to check for square is to run a tape measure from corner to corner. You want to make sure that each measurement, you'll measure twice, and each measurement should be the same exact length. At this point, the deck is not permanent in place. You can still move this box left to right, and that's how you go for square. If you're a few inches high on one side, then you need to move the opposite direction in order to make the box square. Only at this time can you start with the next step. In my case, the next step is to add the joists that are in the center, meaning 18-inch centers is the way that I chose to place my joists. Some people do 12-inch centers, 16-inch centers, 22-inch centers, but in my case, I wanted to go for a little bit better support. Most joists are put under decks at 18-inch centers. I also elected to use 2x6s, which is the same dimension of lumber that I used for the rim joist on the outside. Now, as far as bridging is concerned, bridging is that term that we use where you place a board in between the joists to keep them from crowning over time. Crowning is when the board will curve due to moisture or temperature fluctuations, things of that nature. Now, you will see that most people will say you should use the same dimensional lumber. Like if I use 2x6 for my joist, I should use 2x6 for bridging, but I didn't think I needed that because I knew I was going to add more in the way of support on the bottom. So I used 4x4 posts sitting on 12-inch pavers at every 4 square feet. So I did do a little leg on the outside. I'm not going to go into too much of that. I did want a place to put my smoker and a charcoal burning grill. I needed to be able to access all the way around those grills. And the same thing with the Blackstone and my sink. I need to get to the back of the sink, and I need to get to the back of the Blackstone as well. So once my deck box was square, and I added all my joists, I added my bridging, and I added my posts to keep it level and to keep it sturdy and to support it off of the ground. The last step is to just add your deck boards. Now remember, if your box, your original framing, is not square, you will have an angle issue at the very end. So before you put your deck boards on, you want to make sure one more time that you're absolutely square. Now I didn't film the whole entire process of me putting the deck boards on, because once you've laid one, you know how to lay the other. You need at least 2 screws in each board, in each joist, and that will prevent the deck board from cupping over time. Cupping just means that each side of the board will raise up and it will begin to pool water. It's a form of crowning. So if you place 1 screw on each side of the board into the joist underneath it, you will absolutely have no problems with that at all. The optional step I didn't cover in this video is staining the deck. In my case, I like for pressure treated wood to have dried for a little bit longer out in the elements before I stain them. It helps for the stain to take better. So if you notice, whenever you pick up treated lumber from the store, you're going to get some real heavy wood and you're going to get some real light wood. That's just the amount of treatment that that board has. Some boards take longer to dry out than others. I'm probably going to let this deck go about 3 months before I try to stain it. Yes, I already have things moved up to the deck, but it's nothing to take them down and to stain. And if you do stain it yearly, this deck will last 10 or 12, maybe even 15 years. It does require yearly maintenance, just like anything else around your home. Let me give you some helpful tips. You can use a nail gun, by all means. You saw me use mine, but you do need to go back everywhere you use the nail gun and cover it up with screws. Meaning, if you use 2 nails, you need to use 2 screws as well into the same area that you shot with. The issue is that the lumber is treated, and over time it will contract and expand, meaning it pulls nails out. You don't want to have to deal with that as a regular routine maintenance. You want to place a good wood screw, or decking screw in this case. That way it grabs onto the wood and it doesn't pull out. The last tip I want to give you is really not a tip, because there's a lot of controversy around it, whether you should space or not space. In my case, I chose to space my deck boards at 1/8 of an inch. Now here we don't have dramatic temperature changes like overnight. It generally comes on us a couple of times a year, but that doesn't have too much in the way of effect on the wood. If you live in a desert climate where it is very hot in the day and very cool at night, you need to place a shim in between each of your deck boards in order to get that distance, that separation in between. That way the wood can expand and contract with the different temperatures. In our area, we get a few instances like that, but not enough to make a big difference. So I just used a cabinet shim and placed it in there at 1/8 of an inch. I hope this video helped you in some kind of way. If you have any questions, comments about anything that I've covered in this video, please drop them down in the comment section. I do reply to every single comment that I get. If this is your first time stopping by my channel, I certainly appreciate it. And if you like things in the way of DIYs, reviews, and cooks, by all means, go ahead and subscribe and click that bell for all notifications. Until the next one, this is the Pond Diver.